Dawn, March 17th, 1945. Somewhere near the Remagen bridgehead, Germany. The air smells of cordite and river water. Fog rolls across the Rhine like a living thing, swallowing sound, turning shapes into ghosts. In a bombed-out church tower overlooking a secondary bridge, one the maps barely mention, a young American sniper named James "Red" Sullivan checks his rifle for the 100th time. A Springfield M1903A4, scope-mounted, cold as the morning that surrounds him. His orders were simple. Hold the position until relieved. Prevent enemy crossing. The bridge below is narrow, wooden, half destroyed already from previous shelling. Command doesn't think it's strategically important anymore. They've moved most forces to the main Ludendorff bridge miles away. But Sullivan knows something they don't. Small bridges matter when you're desperate. And the Germans, pushed back, trapped, running out of options, they're desperate. His spotter, Private Tommy Chen, left 3 hours ago, wounded by shrapnel from a mortar round that tore through the bell tower. Before the medics carried him out, Chen grabbed Sullivan's arm and said, "Don't be a hero, Red. Fall back if they come." Sullivan just nodded, but he didn't leave. He never intended to. Because Red Sullivan understood what most didn't. Sometimes one rifle, properly positioned, with a man who refuses to quit, can hold a line that an entire platoon couldn't. Sometimes stubbornness matters more than firepower. Sometimes you don't leave because leaving means others die. The Germans are coming. He can hear them. Distant engines, voices carrying across water. And Red Sullivan, farm boy from Montana, accomplished hunter, mediocre student, decent soldier. He's about to have the longest day of his life. It started at 0600 hours. Movement in the mist. Sullivan watched through his scope as shadows became shapes. Shapes became men. A squad, maybe 12 soldiers, moving cautiously toward the bridge. German infantry, tired, weapons held loosely. They think the bridge is abandoned. They think they're safe. Sullivan waited. His training echoed in his head. Patience. Breathing. Let them commit. He'd learned long ago that the first shot is the most important, not just for what it does, but for what it says. One shot can scatter an enemy, but it can also reveal your position, turn you into a target. He chose his target carefully. Not the lead soldier, that was too obvious. Not the rear, they'd just keep coming. He aimed for the third man, the one carrying the radio. The one who could call for help, coordinate, organize, the one whose death would sever their communication. He squeezed the trigger. The Springfield kicked. The crack echoed across the water. Through his scope, he watched the radio man drop, the equipment scattering. The squad froze. Then they scattered, diving for cover, weapons pointing in every direction except the right one. They didn't know where the shot came from. The church tower was hundreds of yards away, elevated, perfectly camouflaged by damaged stonework. They scanned the opposite bank. They searched the bridge supports. They never looked up at the ruined tower where Sullivan was already chambering another round. He waited. 30 seconds, a minute. Then a soldier broke cover, trying to reach the bridge. Sullivan fired. The man fell. Another soldier attempted to drag the body back. Sullivan didn't fire. He let him. Because scared soldiers who saw their friends die were better than martyrs who died without warning. The squad retreated. First attempt failed. Time 06:07 hours. 11 hours and 53 minutes to go. By 800 hours, the Germans had figured out the general direction. Mortar rounds began falling around the church tower. Not accurate, they didn't have the exact position, but close enough to shake the walls, to rain dust and stone chips down on Sullivan's position. He moved constantly, never staying in the same window, using different firing angles, making it impossible to pinpoint his exact location. A second squad approached, this time with suppressing fire. They peppered the church with rifle fire, machine gun bursts, trying to keep the sniper's head down while soldiers rushed the bridge. It was a good tactic. It almost worked. Sullivan waited for the lulls, the moments between bursts, when the gunners had to reload, when their barrels overheated, when their discipline slipped. In those 2-second windows, he fired. One shot, one target. A soldier halfway across the bridge, another at the bridge's entrance, a third trying to set up a machine gun position. He wasn't trying to kill them all. That was impossible. He was trying to make the bridge itself feel like death. Every step onto that structure meant exposing yourself to an invisible marksman who never missed. He was turning 50 yards of wood and rope into the most dangerous real estate in Germany. And it was working. The Germans pulled back again. But Sullivan knew this wouldn't last. They'd bring more men, better tactics. Eventually, they'd either destroy the tower or overwhelm his position through sheer numbers. Between 1,000 and 1,400 hours, the battle settled into a grim rhythm. The Germans would probe. Sullivan would respond. They'd retreat. Then probe again, from a different angle, with a different approach. Each time, Sullivan adapted. When they tried smoke grenades to obscure the bridge, he waited for the wind to shift, for the gaps in the smoke, then fired at the sounds of boots on wood. When they sent a single soldier crawling along the riverbank, trying to get beneath his firing angle, Sullivan spotted him through patience, watching for the unnatural movements in the reeds, the disrupted water patterns. He was running low on ammunition. 50 rounds when the day started, now down to 33. Each shot had to count more than the last. He began rationing, choosing only the shots that mattered most. Leaders, radio operators, machine gunners, the soldiers whose deaths would disrupt, demoralize, delay. Hunger set in. Thirst followed. His canteen was half empty. His rations, 2 K-ration biscuits, were gone. His shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. His eyes burned from staring through the scope. But he didn't leave, because somewhere behind him, maybe miles away, American troops were regrouping, reinforcing, preparing for the next push. And this bridge, this insignificant, barely mapped wooden bridge, could become an avenue for German reinforcements, a route for counterattack. One man, one rifle, one bridge. It sounded ridiculous, but Sullivan had grown up hunting elk in the Montana mountains, where patience meant everything, where one well-placed shot determined whether your family ate that week. War, he'd discovered, wasn't that different. Just higher stakes. Just heavier consequences. At 14:30 hours, everything changed. Sullivan heard the engines before he saw them, heavier, more powerful. Through his scope, emerging from the forest road, came an armored half-track, followed by at least 30 infantry soldiers. This wasn't a probe. This was an assault. The half-track stopped just out of rifle range. Smart. Whoever commanded this operation had learned from the earlier failures. They weren't going to expose their men to sniper fire unnecessarily. Instead, the half-track's machine gun opened up on the church tower, sustained bursts that tore through stonework, shattered the few remaining windows, forced Sullivan to press himself against the floor as bullets screamed overhead. Under that covering fire, German soldiers rushed the bridge. Not one or two, a dozen, more. They came in waves, knowing that the sniper couldn't hit them all, that sheer numbers would overwhelm a single rifleman. Sullivan knew he couldn't stop them all, but he could slow them. He chose targets with ruthless efficiency. The soldier trying to cut the demolition charges the Americans had left on the bridge. Gone. The officer organizing the crossing, distinguishable by his gestures, his position. Gone. The machine gunner setting up a firing position to suppress any American reinforcements. Gone. 3 shots, 3 Germans down, but the others kept coming. They reached the bridge's midpoint, then the far side. Sullivan's heart hammered. He'd failed. They were crossing. Then the bridge itself betrayed them, the old wood weakened by months of shelling, damaged by previous demolitions, couldn't handle the weight. With a groan that Sullivan heard even from his tower, the center span gave way. Soldiers plunged into the Rhine. Some swam, others didn't. The crossing collapsed into chaos. Sullivan didn't celebrate. He just kept firing. At the survivors struggling in the water, at the soldiers trying to rescue them, at the half-track that had moved closer, now exposed. He couldn't penetrate its armor, but he could hit the driver through the vision slit. 1 shot. Lucky. Impossible. The half-track swerved, crashing into a tree. The Germans pulled back. Again. Time, 15:15 hours. Sullivan checked his ammunition. 18 rounds left. As darkness fell, Sullivan faced a new challenge, staying awake. Exhaustion pulled at him like a physical weight. His body demanded rest. His mind grew foggy, but he knew the Germans would try again under cover of darkness. That's what he would do. He rationed his awareness, forcing himself to scan methodically. Ears more than eyes now, listening for the creak of wood, the splash of water, the whisper of German being spoken too close to the bridge. The moon was a sliver, good for concealment, bad for visibility. At 2100 hours, he heard it. Movement. Not on the bridge, in the water. They were trying to swim across, to bypass the bridge entirely. Sullivan strained his eyes, searching the dark river. There, a ripple that moved wrong, the silhouette of a head-breaking surface. He waited. Let them commit. Let them think they'd succeeded.
When 3 soldiers pulled themselves onto the American side of the bank, exhausted from the swim, Sullivan fired. Not to kill, the darkness made precision impossible, but to alert, to warn, to make noise. The shots echoed across the river. Voices shouted. Soldiers scrambled back into the water, and miles away, American sentries heard the gunfire, knew someone was still fighting, radioed for reinforcement.
Dawn came again. Sullivan had been in position for nearly 24 hours, though his orders said 12. He was down to 7 rounds. His hand shook from fatigue. His vision blurred. But American voices drifted up from below. Reinforcements. A platoon moving up the road, securing the area, checking the bridge. The Germans made one final attempt at 05:45 hours. Desperate, disorganized. Sullivan fired his last 7 rounds, spacing them out, making each shot count. Not all hit. It didn't matter. The Germans saw American soldiers arriving, heard Sullivan's rifle still firing after all these hours, and broke. They retreated, for good this time. At 0600 hours, exactly 12 hours after his watch began, a lieutenant climbed the church tower. He found Sullivan slumped against the wall, rifle across his lap, face pale with exhaustion. "Soldier," the lieutenant said, "you were ordered to hold until relieved, not hold until you died." Sullivan looked up. His voice was hoarse. "Bridge still standing, sir?" "Barely, but yes." "Then I did my job." They helped him down, gave him water, food, told him he'd be mentioned in dispatches. Sullivan didn't care about that. He cared that the men who would have crossed that bridge, who would have hit American positions from behind, who would have killed soldiers who never saw them coming, didn't. 1 man, 1 rifle, 12 hours. Historians would barely mention it. Command would classify it as a minor action at a secondary crossing. But the platoon that didn't get ambushed because no Germans crossed that bridge, they knew. The families who got their sons back because Sullivan refused to leave his post, they'd never know his name, but they owed him everything. James "Red" Sullivan received the Silver Star for his actions that day. He never spoke much about it. Returned to Montana after the war, worked his family ranch, taught his children to shoot. When asked about Germany, about the bridge, about the longest day of his life, he'd say only this: "Sometimes you don't leave because leaving isn't an option. Not because you're brave, because you're the only one there." The church tower still stands, though it's been rebuilt. The bridge was replaced decades ago, now a modern concrete structure that handles commuter traffic. No plaque marks Sullivan's stand. No monument commemorates those 12 hours. But every military sniper training program studies the engagement. They call it the Sullivan Defense, the art of using terrain, patience, and stubborn refusal to quit to achieve what shouldn't be possible. Because Red Sullivan proved something that day. You don't need an army to hold a position. You need someone who won't leave. You need someone who understands that every minute you hold is a minute your friends have to regroup, to prepare, to survive. You need someone who sees a bridge not as wood and rope, but as a line that must not be crossed. And sometimes, just sometimes, one rifle is enough if the man behind it refuses to leave his spot. Modern warfare has changed. Bridges are wider, armies are larger, technology has evolved beyond anything Sullivan could have imagined. But the principle remains. Strategic positions matter, and a single, determined soldier, properly positioned, can change the course of a battle. Today's snipers train in denial operations, using long-range precision fire to prevent enemy use of key terrain. The textbook example? A nameless church tower overlooking a secondary bridge in Germany, March 1945, where a farm boy from Montana with a bolt-action rifle and a stubborn streak held off company-sized elements for 12 hours, not through firepower, but through refusing to accept that one man couldn't make a difference. Because James Sullivan proved that day, sometimes the most important thing a soldier can do isn't heroic, it's just staying. Remaining in position when every instinct screams to run. Firing one more shot when your ammunition is almost gone. Watching when your eyes beg to close. Surviving when survival seems impossible. That's the real story. Not the kills, not the tactics, but the simple, profound act of refusing to leave your spot. Because sometimes, when you're the last man between the enemy and your friends, leaving isn't bravery. Staying is. And Red Sullivan stayed.